Hey guys, so today I'm gonna try making a tutorial. I've never done this kind of thing before, so I think it might be fun to try and hopefully it'll help you guys out with your own character designs and drawings as well. So I'll be showing you a bit of my character design process, just how I go about doing things personally, as well as some tips when it comes to painting and just things like that. So yeah, let's begin. So this is a rough sketch of the final design that I'm going to be using. I'll show you a bit of the design process here as well. I had no idea what kind of character I wanted to draw when I started doing this, so I just started off with a bunch of random sketches, just messing about with different ideas, trying to combine ideas, just figuring out what works and what doesn't. And I think it's important to just try things even if you don't like it, because that's where ideas come from. By experimenting with different shapes and designs until you find something that works essentially, and you'll see a lot of the ideas from these sketches shows in the final design itself. So just like the design sketches, I usually do quick sketches for the pose of the character as well. And I think it's important to get the correct pose for the character because it's also what defines what kind of character they are, their personality. So it's something I like to focus on a little bit more at the early stages of the drawing. So these first two are just basic standing poses of the character, and the second one I did was actually what I had in mind originally for the final picture, but you'll see that that actually changes near the end. And these ones are me just trying more dynamic action poses, but I don't think that they fit the character as well, so I ended up not using them. And these don't have to be too detailed, because they're just as idea sketches at the end of the day, and no one's going to see them but you. So yeah, I'll just let the video carry on here. So I went into a bit more detail with this pose because I kind of liked it. I wanted to see what it would look like more as a final image, so I added some basic clothes details, added a face, some hair. So this is the final pose that I decided on, so I'm just going to copy and paste it over to a new canvas. I usually start with a canvas size of 5000 by 3000, but it doesn't really matter what size you use, just as long as it's big enough to get all the details in, and I usually end up cropping the picture at the end anyway, so here I've just put the pose sketch and the rough final design sketch on the same page just so I can reference it when I'm drawing. Pretty much just going to start drawing on top of the sketch, just adding more detail and getting ready to line work. So I'm just going to speed up this part so you don't have to sit through it all. So here I'm just using the lasso tool and the transform tool to quickly reposition things and make sure that they look right. I'm also flipping the canvas as well just to check for any mistakes, and you might notice that when you do this you'll quickly realize any mistakes that you've made. So for example, you might notice that everything is leaning over to one side or something, so you can just quite easily correct that. So just as an example, I'm going to quickly show some of the things that I was thinking about with this pose. First, you can see the whole pose in general follows this kind of S-shaped curve, which kind of makes things look more natural. It makes things look like they flow a little bit better. Another thing I try to imagine is some sense of movement in these poses, so I think of it in a way that this is kind of like a freeze frame from a film or something, from a video. So here I imagine that her hips would be moving in this general direction, so as a result of that the skirt would be coming up as well in this direction, so it kind of sticks out on this side more than the other. And I also wanted to try and get a general sense of balance in this. So on what side her arm is sticking out, the hair is flowing in the opposite direction to kind of fill in the space on the other side. And you'll see here that I kind of show what it would look like if the hair was flowing on the same side as the arm, which could be effective if she was standing with something on her right, for example, but in this case I kind of thought it would look better if the hair was flowing to the right. So in the sketch phase it's quite important to try and get as much detail as you can in the sketch, so when it comes to line work you know exactly where to put the lines, you know exactly how everything works. So here you can see me just detailing the hand in. I've seen a lot of people when they do sketches, they try and avoid details like this, so they kind of just miss out the hands, or they just put scribbles for the hands or whatever, but you should try and essentially make the sketch like a first line work, if you know what I mean. So you've got all of the information there that you'll need when the line work stage does come. So here I'm starting the line work now. I set the initial sketch layer to about 20% opacity or something, and just make a new layer on top of that to start the line work. And I'm just gonna line in the face here, just to show you how I do it. It's pretty self-explanatory really. You essentially just line work over what you've already done. Just make it look neater, and maybe correct any mistakes that you made on the sketch, because this is essentially what's going to be in the final image, so you want it to look right. With the eyes, I actually think that they're more difficult to position correctly than they are to draw, and to actually make them both point in the same direction. So one thing that I'll usually do is on my monitor I'll actually cover one eye of the drawing with my hand while I draw the other one in, just to make sure they're both looking towards the camera or something. And I've seen it sometimes where people draw a character, they want to look towards the camera, and one eye, the closest eye, will actually be looking towards the camera, but the other will be looking in a completely different direction. So I think that's an important thing to make sure that you get right. So I'm just going to cut away from the video quickly and show you a quick trick when it comes to line working that I use. You see I'm about to draw the hair, and it does at times get a bit complicated. So when you want to draw something that's above or beneath something else, I'll usually draw both things on separate layers and then erase the lines that I don't want afterwards, which basically makes it easier to align things like this without ruining the original line work, and you'll see me do this when it comes to drawing the hair on this character. So now that the line work's finished, I usually merge all the layers together into a single line work layer. So now all I have is the sketch layer and the line work layer above it. At this point you can turn off the sketch layer and just make a new layer underneath the line work layer, which will be our color layer. So to start off with, I take the polygon lasso tool and just go around the outside of my line work and then fill it in with a solid color, just as a base. It doesn't take too long depending on how complex it is, probably about 5 to 10 minutes, and I find that it's quicker than just painting everything in manually. So once I filled it in with a solid color, I usually just go around checking to see if there's any parts that I can just neaten up a bit. And I usually just go around with the lasso tool again and just delete the parts that don't need to be there as well. And if you have anything in the background, then it's probably easier to do that on a layer beneath the original color base, just to make it easy when it comes to painting everything in afterwards. So with that done now, we want to add color to this. So before you start, if you select the color layer and click that small checker box next to where it says lock, this basically allows you to paint over the base without it going over the edges, which is quite handy. And from here out you just pretty much block in the main colors that you want to use, and since I already have the final design sketch over on the right, I'm just color picking from that. So after you've got all your main colors in place, the next thing to do would be to shade everything in. And apparently I wasn't recording, so it kind of just jumps to this part, but you can see I've gone ahead and put in some of the main shadow areas, and as such, at this point you mainly want to be thinking about just light and shadow. So you'd have areas that are in light and areas that are in shadow, and that's it. And here I've just gone for a simple top-down light setup. And when you do this, you want to try and avoid using full white or full black. We're going to save that for the highlights and the occlusion shadows. So cutting away from the video again, I just want to show you how I select colors. So when you want to paint shadows from a base color, instead of literally just making it darker, you also want to change the hue of the color as well. So generally shadow tones will be more blue, so the hue will move towards blue. So here you can see with the one underneath, this shadow tone appears more red, and it looks a lot better than the one above. And with the skin tone I chose for this character, you'll see that the darker areas are almost in the pink section of the hue. So for things like the stitching on the clothes here, I'll usually add stuff like that on a layer above the base color layer, and this is just because it's easier to edit the colors underneath that if ever I make a mistake or something. So from here on, it's pretty much just doing the same thing until everything's done. Just adding the shadows in the right places, adding the light in the right places. And sometimes I'll airbrush in, you can see here, I'll airbrush in like lighter areas and darker areas overall, just so it reads better form wise. So once I finish all the shading, another thing I like to do towards the end of a picture is atmospheric fade, which is essentially just kind of fading out all of the background elements of the picture. So to do this, what I'll start by doing is making a selection of the color based layer, which you can do by holding down Control and clicking on the color layer image, and then make a new layer above the linework layer and select a light kind of blue color. I usually select a light blue kind of color, and literally just airbrush in all of the areas that you want to be faded out into the background and you don't want to draw attention to. So here I did it with things like the hair. I did it a little bit on the arm on the left as well. So another little thing that I like to do towards the end of my pictures is add rim light to it. So to do this, I'll make a selection of the color based layer again, but making a new layer underneath the linework this time, and essentially just going around one side of the image with just white like this. And this basically just makes things stand out a bit more. It just makes it look a bit more cool, more effective. And you can add rim light to whatever side you want, whatever angle you want. You can even add it to both sides if you want to do that sometimes. So yeah, that's pretty much it as far as this image goes. I just flipped it back around the right way at the end. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this helped you out in some way.